Hi, I'm Lippy. I am a shamanic healer, and in today's video, I would like to talk to you about narcissistic clubs in society. Are you an unwilling, unwitting, confused member of a narcissistic club? How would you know? That is what we're going to cover in this video. Now, I just want to make it clear that when I say narcissistic club, I do not necessarily mean that it's a deliberate club that is made up of people who have what is known in psychiatry as narcissistic personality disorder. I want to be very, very clear that narcissism is a spectrum disorder, and not everyone who behaves narcissistically necessarily or has narcissistic values is an NPD, a narcissistic personality disorder, because that is the pathological aspect of narcissism, where you have somebody who has full-blown NPD and they are on the higher end of the spectrum, the highest end of the spectrum being a person who is psychopathic, where the narcissism has turned psychopathic. And according to psychiatric research, people who have NPD make up less than 7% of the population. At least in the US, it's supposed to be between 1 and 6%. So I'm not necessarily referring to people who have NPD. I am talking about people who may also have NPD, yes, who may even be sociopaths and psychopaths, which is pretty scary, but who are on the higher end of the spectrum and have highly narcissistic values. Now, I don't have any official figures to share with you, because I haven't done any sort of official research into this, but I have spent the last 17 years of my life studying narcissism and the phenomenon of narcissism very, very closely. And in my experience and my observation, even NPD, which is supposedly rare, is not as rare as it's made out to be. I mean, at least in my observation. So please don't hold me to this. I don't, I can't provide you with any kind of proof as to what I'm saying, concrete proof. But in my observation, there are a lot more NPD people than we realize. And I think it's because narcissism as a disorder would be very, very difficult to evaluate. Like, I don't know how these guys got these statistics, like the one between 1 and 6% in America. In India, I was reading, because I'm Indian, so I was looking, at my own country, where, in my view, Indian society is highly narcissistic, and so are many societies all over the world. In my view, I was saying the Indian, the percentage of NPD in India was very, very rare. Apparently, it's apparently 1%, and only 1 million of the population, apparently, or something like that. And the statistics seem dodgy to me, because first of all, we have a population of 1 billion, so I don't buy that we have just 1% of the population as NPD. I have personally seen a lot of NPD here. It's just that it's probably not detected. It goes undetected because very little is known about narcissism. If you talk to the average Indian person, they don't know anything about it, and a lot of narcissistic behavior and values are very normalized here. So I don't know. I'm not in agreement with those figures, and definitely my experience tells me otherwise. But to cut a long story short, I would definitely say that the clubs that I'm going to talk to you about today may have NPD members. In fact, the main head of the unofficial heads of the club are probably NPD, but the enablers in these clubs and the rest of the motley crew may not necessarily have NPD, but definitely the ideologies that the values that they ascribe to are highly narcissistic in nature. Now, as I was saying earlier, I've also observed, and I'd actually made a video on this called Narcissistic Abuse by Society, where do narcissists come from? They don't exist in a vacuum, and definitely there is a high, there is a very sort of socially acceptable move towards narcissistic values, which seems to be going from bad to worse. And this is not just in India. I've seen this in many countries. I work in Goa a couple of months a year. I do shamanic healing there, and I have clients from all over the world. And I see that they have been deeply damaged and affected by these narcissistic values that are sort of forced on them by society. And this is an experience I have observed, in people from many different countries. So it's not exclusive to one particular country. You can't say that this culture is highly narcissistic and this isn't. This seems to be a global phenomenon. And the clubs that I'm referring to, the narcissistic clubs, are a, a symptom of a larger social malaise, which I think is not getting enough. It's not getting enough of the light of day, if I may call it that. It's not getting enough of attention. And everybody is talking about individual narcissists, and narcissists that have abused them in relationships and families and things like that. But it really is a much larger social malaise, and the clubs are a symptom of that. Now, when I talk about a narcissistic club, I definitely don't mean to say that a bunch of narcissists got together and said, hey, let's form a club and let's target empaths and sensitive, vulnerable people, or anyone we can manipulate for supply into this club. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about more of a law of attraction come family systems kind of creation, where like energies come together. And just to tell you a little bit about this, so there's a concept in psychology which is the idea of family systems, as propagated or proposed by this very famous psychologist called Murray Bowen. And he actually, so I'm going to quote him. So he said that the family is an emotional unit, and any change in the emotional functioning of one member unit is predictably compensated for by changes in the emotional functioning of other members of this unit. Now, again, in my experience, I have found this to be very, very true. And what I have noticed is the dysfunctional narcissistic family is the seed for these narcissistic clubs. Because just like any other family unit, where you have every member plays a particular role, in dysfunctional families or narcissistic families, these roles are very rigid, and people get slotted into roles whether they want to or not. And as Murray Bowen said, the family unit is all connected. So emotionally, if one member experiences a shift, the other members will fall in line with that shift, accordingly with that shift. And I have seen that people who come from narcissistic families, who have been abused by narcissistic families, who either become narcissists themselves or don't necessarily become narcissists but become targets for abuse by narcissists, usually create their own systems, albeit unconsciously. So this is unconscious, it's not done consciously. And I have observed about 4 of these types of systems that exist in society, and they're very real. I have experienced them in 3D. I have been part of some of those clubs myself, unwillingly, till I managed to pry myself out of there. And these systems, these clubs, are made up of a group of, some of them have NPD, some of them have, sort of, well, I don't agree with, I know codependency is a very, very popular term, and they always say narcissist and codependent. I don't really agree with the codependent thing much, because to me, codependency is a very outdated term. I think I never sort of got with the term. To me, it's attachment trauma. So I don't really believe in codependence as such. I believe that people have attachment trauma, and that's why they get trauma bonded to disordered people, disordered personalities. And so I have seen this, that in the uh, club, in this arrangement, there will be the abuser and the person who's being abused, but it's just happening on a slightly larger scale than a relationship where, a man is abusing his wife or his girlfriend or friend or whatever, or a woman is abusing her partner. So the first club that I'm going to refer to today is what I call the Narc Boys Club, and I actually got into a little bit of trouble, because I wrote an article about this, which I'm going to cut, copy, and paste down in the comment section below, a few months back. And it was very, very interesting, because I wrote this article about this. It was a great learning for me. And what I learned when I wrote this article was, if you want to know who's a narc in your friend circle, or you want to know who are the narcs around you, just write an article about narcissism, and you will know, because they will come after you. And I got so badly trolled on that article. So it's very interesting, because I had a lot of people who liked the article, and the people who liked the article didn't comment on it. They just liked it because I could sense somewhere that they got it. They got what I was talking about, because they have either been at the receiving end of narc abuse or know someone who has. And the people who trolled me on that article were well, they were vicious, and they were really aggressive with their comments. And I was actually laughing. I was laughing about this, because I was like, wow, there they come. All the narcs come, crawling out of the woodworks, because the worst fear of a narc is being exposed. And the article was obviously very threatening to them. And the article that I wrote talked about this club that I have observed. This is a very powerful, real life 3D experience that I've had, and I have seen other people go through. So it's coming purely from that experience. Please understand that, again, I haven't gone into a lab and researched this officially or anything like that. It's just based on my observations and my experience, and then that has been clubbed together with the secondary research that I have done on narcissism. Now, the Narcissist Boy Club usually consists of a group of narcissistic men, either men with NPD or men with highly narcissistic, misogynistic values. I just want to say over here for a minute that I have realized that there are the parallels between the patriarchy and narcissism cannot be ignored. They are too strong. They are too strong. And therefore I've coined a new term, which I now call the narciarchy, because to me the patriarchy is narcissistic. And that is a whole separate video, but I'm just going to use the term here to mean men and women, because women are part of the narciarchy as well. And they are often, some women who are highly misogynistic themselves are often mouthpieces for the narciarchy. And this group of men are a very prominent real life display of the narciarchy. And what they will do is they tend to target women who are very specific kind of women. So they will tend to target women who are free-spirited, usually very talented. Of course, they have these, would be very attractive, very beautiful women, because hey, these are narcissists. They want to have arm candy on they want to have like this arm candy to show off, and obviously that's something that's very important to them. And these will be usually women who are highly empathic, women who are creative and who are clueless about what they're about to get into. And usually one of these narcissist club boys, men, whatever you want to call them, will hook up with this kind of a target, and the intention is everybody later, that whole group is going to exploit that woman in some way or the other. We'll get to the exploitation part in a minute, and love bomb her. So this man will hook up with the target woman and love bomb her and make her feel like, she's the most amazing woman in the world. I mean, they can be, narcissists can be so charming, and they can charm the pants off a snake. And not only will he love bomb her, he will then introduce her to this group of friends. And the group of friends includes some people with NPD, many people all of them who subscribe to narcissistic values, enablers of the main narcissist, and also some very highly misogynistic women, who some of them are narcissists themselves. And when she's introduced into the group, it's not just the man who love bombs her, the group love bombs her as well. So she feels like she feels really special, and she feels like she's part of this amazing group who gets her and who's so appreciative of her beauty and her talents, etc., etc. That is still the devalue and discard phase. So those of you who are new to narcissism, of course I strongly recommend you watch other videos. There are lots of amazing YouTubers who have the basics, the foundational information on narcissism, and that's not what we're covering here today, so I don't want to go too deeply into that. But these I lost my train of thought. Okay, but basically the three phases of a narcissist cycle is your love bombing, and then the devalue and the discard, which doesn't stop there. So it's not love bombing, devalue, and discard, and you never see them again. Oh, narcissists never leave. They're never going to leave. You have to leave. They will never leave. It's usually love bombing, devalue, discard, and then at some other stage they will hoover, come back and love bomb you again, and then again devalue, discard. So it's a cycle. It goes on and on and on, which is very, very difficult to get out of. And what they will do in the devalue phase is very, very scary, because the first thing that happens in the devalue phase is all of a sudden this man who's dating this girl who's popular not only with him but also in the group, and she's like this golden-eyed girl in the group, is suddenly, the man starts getting cold and withdrawn. Suddenly the calls aren't coming in that much. She hears maybe stories that he's been seen out with someone else, and she's wondering, what did I do? Like, what's going on? And of course she wants to understand. So initially it's just a state of shock, like, I thought this guy really liked me. And some of these women are actually thinking that maybe they've met their soulmate or their life partner, and they're thinking like, wow, I've met this amazing guy, and he's so smart, and he's so funny, and he's so charming, and he has these amazing friends who really love me, and we really all get each other, and I feel so warm and taken care of, and so excited to be around this energy. And now all of a sudden this guy is going AWOL, and I don't know what the hell is happening. And when she tries to confront the guy, well, the typical narcissistic MO, when you try to confront them with their behavior, is they gaslight you. So she's made to feel like she's crazy, that either she's imagined that he's going AWOL, or then she's made to feel like she's crazy for expecting a relationship, because then it's like, who told you we were in a relationship? And usually the woman is very confused, because it's like, well, the response that she thought she was receiving from this man and his group of friends made her feel like she was his girlfriend, and now she's being told that, oh, did you just imagine that, like, you're not expecting a relationship. And it's very, very confusing. And when she questions, so she felt that energy, she felt it. When she questions this man, she gets gaslit. And if this goes on long enough, and it usually does, sadly it does go on long enough, because most of the time the victims are clueless, they have no clue what's hit them, and they're trying to read like self-help books, they're trying to like talk to friends and get advice on how to please a man, or how to be the ideal woman, or whatever, blah blah blah, and none of it is working, or they think that if it isn't working, it's their fault. And then over a period of time, this woman or these women who are victims in this way will start to lose all sense of self-worth. Their self-confidence is going to go down the drain. I've seen many of them have mental breakdowns and totally fall apart. And when that happens, the other men in the group will start to close in on the woman. And suddenly, because she has, her self-esteem is all over the floor, and if she has attachment trauma from childhood, she has terrible fears of abandonment, she is now craving. So it's like a drug, she's craving all that attention that the man gave her in the first place. She'll try to get it from one of his friends, and the next thing you know, that guy, the main guy who she thought was the love of her life or whatever, has discarded her. He's disappeared somewhere, and then she is probably hooking up with one of his friends. Now when I say friends, it doesn't have to be close friends. So what I have noticed is these narc clubs are funnily composed of people who may not necessarily hang out with each other all the time, may not be best friends, maybe also, but lo and behold, if you start questioning some members of the group about their association with your ex, and suddenly you realize, hey, everyone knows each other. Now my main city where I come from, where I have lived the most in Mumbai, in India, is Mumbai. And in Mumbai you have 6 degrees of separation, everyone knows everyone, there's this small party circuit and everyone knows everyone on the party circuit. So somebody can argue and say, well, everyone knows everyone in Mumbai anyway. Yeah, it's true to a large extent, but not the way these guys know each other. They all seem to have this funny connection. And if you if you actually sat them down together in some living room somewhere, you see they all kind of talk alike. They crack the same jokes. They sort of dress alike. They listen to the same kind of music. It's really weird. And a lot of them, by the way, are cokeheads. So they love to do, of course, that's the narcissist drug of choice. So they're also cokeheads. But anyway, the point I was coming back to was that this woman is then going to become now the target for other narcissists in the group. So basically it's supply. So there was one narc getting supply from her, and when he's done with her for the time being, the other narcs will close in. And I'm very sad to say that in some cases, in some very severe cases, there have been women who have also been sexually assaulted in this kind of a situation. And even raped. It's a very sad situation that I have observed happen. And just to share with you, I've had personal experience with this, because I dated two men with full-blown NPD, and they were part of the same narc club. And this was exactly the MO. This is exactly the first guy that I dated, who I didn't know then had full-blown NPD. We went through the love bombing, devalue, discard phase, all happened in a span of like 3 months. And 2 years after that, I started dating another guy who I later realized also had full-blown NPD, and was a friend of this other guy. And the MO was exactly the same. And the only difference is here, the love bombing, devalue, and discard went on for a lot longer. And it took me years and years to get out of that situation. And it was very scary, because I would see this. I would see these strange going-ons, which when I tried to confront and I tried to put my finger on it, I'd always get gaslighted. And I also saw that when my relationship finally ended with these two men, I got cold shouldered by the group. So the same group earlier who, when they saw me, looked like they had seen, I don't know, Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa come alive out of the painting or something, to use an exaggerated statement, now would look at me, and they were very avoidant. They would, if we ever bumped into each other in public, there was a very polite hello, but underneath that you could pick up a lot of strange energy, which was very avoidant, and you felt like as if people were talking behind your back, but you don't know what they were saying, because suddenly you were like like somebody who had leprosy or something, and very strange energy that. And I had another horrible experience when I shifted to Pune. So in 2007 I shifted to Pune, and my first flat that I took on rent, I was in a very bad shape at that point of time. And I remember this first flat that I took on rent had this landlord who I now look back and realize, oh my God, that guy was a complete sociopath. And I was really desperate, both financially and emotionally at that point. And when I took the flat, I didn't have a lot of money to move out quickly if I needed to move out, and it was a very difficult situation. And I remember this guy started pressurizing me to meet up with one of his good friends. And I sort of got this feeling that it wasn't said, but there was this underlying energy to the proposition, which was something like, either you meet up with my friend or you move from this flat. You leave the flat. And this wasn't said, it wasn't even implied, but it was an energy that I picked up, because there was a forcefulness to, so when you're going to meet my friend, and it was very scary. And later on I had people tell me that, yeah, this guy is famous for doing that. They apparently would take tenants who were women, and then this was the MO. There was one guy who would take on the tenants, and then they would take on these attractive women and then introduce them to the friend. And it was sort of a little bit of an intimidation that if they didn't meet up with the friend, it was somewhere being told that they wouldn't get the flat, they would have to vacate the flat. And who wants to like move into a flat and move out immediately, right? But yeah, so this is an example of how these Narc clubs operate. And one of my reasons for making this video is, if you're trapped in these kind of situations, is for you to recognize what's going on. And if you are not, thank God, is to avoid this. And this is like a warning to women everywhere to avoid these kind of clubs, because they do exist. Now, another very interesting club that I have seen, a narcissist club, is the narcissist families. And this usually consists of a typical family unit plus their friends and extended family, who are usually a close-knit group. Most likely it would be a family that is part of some kind of an organization like the army, or some kind of large corporate where these guys provide housing for everyone in the community. Like the army provides housing for all their members, and you have certain giant corporates where you have entire areas that belong just to the corporate, and the members of these corporates live there. And so usually you will have these kind of family units in these places, and most of them have so the Narci families will all sort of gravitate towards each other. And what I have observed is that they tend to have a very us versus them attitude. So usually it will be a group of 5, 6, 7 families that are huddling together. So it's like a subculture where they believe themselves to be distinct and different from everybody else, so they're isolated from the rest. So if there are 100 families in that community, there will be like 5 or 6 families who will be separate, and they tend to hang out with each other a lot. And their intention, this is again the whole narcissistic value, is they basically end up exploiting the weakest members of the family, and that would be usually the women and the children, because they have the least power in that dynamic. Well, they do, again, this is changing in many countries, but in India, definitely, women still don't have a lot of social power. So there's a huge emphasis placed in these families on the idealized family image. So the husband is supposed to be the ideal husband, the wife is supposed to be the ideal wife, the kids are supposed to be the ideal kids, and everybody is supposed to be picture postcard perfect, perfectly educated, perfectly well groomed, perfectly in harmony. And these are the kind of people who make those cheesy family photographs. And these families really believe in those values. Like, there is very little regard for the individual, their true feelings, their true needs. It's all about image. And usually the children are, so you will have, as in a typical narcissistic family, where you have the role of the scapegoat and you have the role of the golden child. Usually in like this group of families, you will have 1 or 2 children who are the golden child of the entire group, and they will be the idealized children. So the other kids would constantly be compared to these golden children, and would constantly be berated for not looking like the golden child, or dressing like the golden child, or getting the right grades, or getting into the right school or the right college, or being popular, etc., etc., like the golden child. And the women, are either, some of them are NPD themselves, some of them are borderline, some of them become similar to like borderline because they develop CPTSD from the narcissistic abuse, are usually the ones trying to like uphold the narcissistic values and doing all the hard work for everybody. So they're the ones making sure that the husband looks right and gets to work and gets his promotion, and the children look right. So either if they're the scapegoats, they're berated to be like the golden child, or if it's the golden child, that the golden child is keeping up his or her role. And this kind of narcissistic family unit is highly damaging to everyone, especially to the victims. And the children who are part of this unit are, it's hell on earth for that child. And most likely these children will develop complex post-traumatic stress disorder or other mental issues. They may develop severe depression, anxiety. Some of them end up with more severe illnesses, even schizophrenia in severe cases, not in every case, because of the level of covert and overt abuse that they face in this kind of system. Another kind of narc group or narc club is what I call narc institutions. Now these usually consists of groups that could be together for any reason. Usually it's some kind of cohesive collective ideology or agenda, and this could be a religious or a spiritual group, a political group, a women's group even. I have seen the most unempowered women's groups that are actually narcissist, misogynistic women's group passing off as women's empowerment groups. Oh my god, it's a disaster. It's really, really bad. And the main intention of these institutions is to exploit the vulnerable for supply. And usually they tend to have cult-like cultures. So those who are looking for answers, or who need help or support, or who are going through something in their life where they're trying to gravitate towards a support group, or trying to find their soul group, or whatever, whether it's a spiritual quest or a political one, is hard to say. And these people, if they're very vulnerable and they're very naive to these kind of narcissistic values and the tactics of narcissists, are thoroughly brainwashed and gaslighted with half truths in groups like this. And also, if they have their own opinion or their own idea or their own view that is contrary to the group view, this is not tolerated. This is not taken lightly and is seen as some kind of betrayal to the group. And depending on the groups, if it's a very severe kind of cult, those can be really, really dangerous. But I'm not talking about, well, there's severe cults as well, but also you have something a little bit milder, where it's not a severe cult, but if you have an opinion or an idea that's different to the group, it's not welcomed or sort of embraced. You're shamed for it, and your being part of the group is threatened by that. And usually this kind of institution will appoint incompetent and inexperienced leaders who really don't know what they're talking about. And if anyone questions them, anyone tries to question their ideology or challenge their lack of expertise in that area, there's hell to pay for that, either by way of, in severe cases, threats and intimidation, or by way of shaming. And usually you will find that if you try to leave that institution or you try to leave that group because you just simply get fed up, you are you are literally treated like as if you're some kind of leper or some. I mean, it depends on how the guilting and the shaming is done. Sometimes it's done very overtly, sometimes it's very covert. I have two examples to offer in this particular regard. I just want to check. Oh my god, this video is really going on. I wanted to finish this video in 20 minutes, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But I will try to wrap this up in like the next 10 minutes. Sorry, I'm just talking a lot today. It's been a long time since I made a video, so I'm here for. I'm quite excited to meet with all of you again, and hence the yap. So an example of this is so in India here we have so-called women empowerment groups, and my god, I'm some of them are amazing, some of them are really the real thing, and they're amazing, and I would love to be part of them. But some of them come out with the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. So we had a very sad case which made world headlines a couple of years ago, where there was a attack on a student in the capital, a Delhi student, and she was raped and killed, and it was a very big case that happened. And apparently one of these women group chairmen, I don't remember which group it was now, can't recall, but I remember she actually went up on stage, and there was this big banner put up there about women's empowerment, and she actually talked about how this girl would have not been killed if she had just submitted to the rape. And oh my god, I mean, I have no words. I have no words. These are the kind of morons. There's no other word, so I'm not going to mince my words here. These are the kind of morons that are in the position of chairperson, secretary, or whatever in these kind of institutions. It's scary. It's very, very scary. And then there was another case that happened with me, where a couple of years ago I was part of a spiritual group. And so to be fair, they were not like the intimidating, crazy Charles Manson cult or anything like that. However, they were not open to anything that was spiritual outside of their idea of what was spiritual. And I remember I had a tough time because they kept insisting that the answer to every problem was that particular spiritual practice. And I remember at that point of time I was suffering from severe depression. I had just come out of a very bad breakdown, a mental breakdown. And I remember one of their leaders, she asked me why I hadn't been practicing for a while, because I had stopped practicing, and the reason was that particular spiritual practice is lovely. I'm not arguing that it's not lovely. However, I had stopped practicing for a while because when I was severely depressed and I was having a breakdown, I found that when I was practicing, my symptoms were getting aggravated. Now, it's logical, if you have certain symptoms and by doing something your symptoms increase, it's logical that you would stop that thing, and maybe you would ask for advice and say, like, wait a minute, why are my symptoms increasing? And this woman had no understanding of psychology or what had happened to me, and she just said to me, she said, basically she shamed me, and she said, if you don't continue with your spiritual practice, you're going to have another breakdown. Can you believe that's what she said to me? And she was supposed to be a leader in that group. So this is what I mean. I'm not saying that the group itself is narcissistic necessarily, but this is a narcissistic value where you totally disregard the person's experience and their feelings and their soul. And it's all about adhere to an ideology, whether that ideology is relevant in this case or not. So ridiculous. Last but not least, narcissistic companies. Now, these consist of companies which have a high level covert or overt narcissist, usually as the boss, and he has a motley crew of other narcissists who are either his golden boys, golden girls, and his enablers, and of course the poor, unwitting, unwilling employees who then become supply for these predators. And usually a lot of these depends on the type of narcissist the boss is, but sometimes it's the very covert narcissist who seems very charming and wonderful and sweet, and everyone thinks like this, the sun shines out of his ass basically. And what he does is that he exploits people with a vision, because he has these grandiose visions, and you have people who will give up everything, their personal life, their time and space, just to like feed this person's personal vision, and usually to their detriment. And another thing that these companies will do is they have a strange tendency to keep hiring other narcissists and other sociopaths. It's really interesting because I once worked in a company where I was a high performer, I was doing really well, and I wanted to do even better. And I would keep, however, having to deal with either new bosses or employees coming on board who were basically either complete jerks or were narcs and sociopaths. And they would make a very negative, highly toxic work environment. So even your best employee is like they would be falling apart, and me and other people who were also high performing employees were suffering in this environment. And when we would complain to the boss about it, we were gaslighted and told that no, nothing was wrong, or we were told that the matter would be looked into, but it was dismissed. Now it's very interesting because I started my own company in 2009, and right from day one I had this what I call the no asshole policy. I was like, I'm not going to hire assholes, because assholes hire other assholes. I was very, very clear about that. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to basically make sure that my high performers don't have to live in this kind of toxic pool or this toxic environment. It's just not fair to them. It's totally unfair. You can't expect them to stick around in that kind of environment. Well, I think I have really overshot my time today, and I would love to tell you more about narcissistic groups. And these are the 4 that I have observed, but narcissistic clubs. But if you have more that you have observed, then I would be very happy to hear from you if you'd like to share those stories with me. But for today, I am going to let you go, and hope to see you soon next week. Thank you so much, and goodbye.